Disclaimer: it's inspired by reality, shaped by imagination.
The studio lights of The View glowed brighter than usual that morning. The topic was one that had already set social media ablaze. Should family inheritance be taxed more heavily? But no one expected it to become the episode everyone would be talking about for weeks. Joy Behar leaned into the conversation with her signature smirk, ready to challenge anyone who disagreed. Across the table sat Cher, calm, poised, and unmistakably confident. She had come prepared to defend what she called the right to pass on what you've built. At first, it felt like a spirited debate between two powerful women from different worlds. But the tone shifted when Joy joked that rich people cry hardest when the tax man knocks. Cher's face tightened. What followed was not just a policy debate, it was a generational and moral clash that hit deeply personal territory. Producers tried to steer the show back on track, but the sparks were unstoppable. Within minutes, the discussion about taxes turned into something raw, about family, legacy, and fairness. By the time the credits rolled, The View's audience had witnessed one of the most intense exchanges in daytime television history. And as the clip hit millions of views online, one headline summed it up. Cher walks off The View after explosive clash with Joy Behar.
The morning sun poured through the tall windows of the View studio, bouncing off the gold-toned set that framed the famous round table. Joy Behar was in rare form, playful, sharp, and already stirring the pot before the cameras even started rolling. "All right," she said with a grin as the theme music faded and the audience applause settled. "Today, we're asking a question that's sure to make a few people clutch their pearls. Should family inheritance be taxed more heavily?" The audience chuckled, sensing what was coming. Sitting to Joy's right was Whoopi Goldberg, sipping her tea with that patient half-smile. Across from them, Sunny Hostin and Ana Navarro exchanged looks, both eager for the fireworks they knew were inevitable. And right in the middle of it all sat Cher, dressed in sleek black with silver jewelry that caught the studio lights, her presence commanding without saying a word. Whoopi turned toward her. "Cher, I gotta start with you. You've been vocal about wealth and fairness, but you've also said that families should be able to pass on what they've earned. Where do you stand on this?" Cher gave a small nod, adjusting the microphone pinned to her blazer. "Look, Whoopi, I've worked my whole life, decades in an industry that chews people up and spits them out. If I've built something, I think it's only right I decide who it goes to. My kids, my grandkids, not the government." The audience clapped, a few cheers rippling through the studio. Joy leaned forward, her expression playful but pointed. "Okay, Cher, but we're not talking about your gold records here. We're talking about billionaires, people who never work a day in their lives because their parents did. Why shouldn't they pay more into a system that helps everyone?" Cher smiled tightly. "Joy, I get what you're saying, but let's be honest. Taxing inheritance more heavily doesn't just hit billionaires. It hits middle-class families too. People who've saved all their lives just to give their kids a house or some security. It's not always about mansions and yachts." Sunny nodded. "That's true. The inheritance tax threshold might be high, but the idea behind it is fairness. Should wealth stay locked within a few families forever, or should it circulate?" Cher tilted her head slightly. "Fairness sounds nice until you realize how often it punishes the people who work the hardest. My mom never had much. She taught me that when you finally make it, you don't owe your success to someone else's guilt trip." The studio murmured with a mix of agreement and tension. Joy, sensing the energy, turned to the audience. "You hear that, folks? Cher says success shouldn't come with guilt. I say success doesn't mean you get a free pass from giving back." The two women locked eyes, Joy leaning in, Cher sitting tall, unflinching. Whoopi, always the voice of reason, tried to smooth the edges. "All right, ladies, let's keep it civil. Nobody's taking anyone's estate away today." But Joy wasn't done. "I'm just saying, Cher, we live in a country where working families can barely afford rent while trust fund kids are buying their third vacation home. Maybe it's time we stop calling inheritance a gift and start calling it what it is, a privilege." Cher's lips parted in disbelief. "A privilege? Joy, it's called family. You work, you save, you pass it on. That's not privilege, that's the American dream." If the government wants to fix inequality, maybe start with corporate loopholes, not grandma's house. The crowd erupted, half cheering, half gasping. Sonny glanced toward the control booth as producers gestured to keep rolling. Anna chimed in, trying to lighten things. Ladies, I think we can agree that nobody wants grandma's jewelry collection taxed at 80%, right? Joy smirked. Depends on the jewelry. Cher shot her a sharp look, but smiled thinly. You always make a joke, Joy, but for a lot of people, this isn't funny. I've seen friends lose their family homes because they couldn't afford the tax bill after their parents passed. It's devastating. Joy's tone softened a bit. I get that, Cher. But do you really think inheritance keeps society fair? Some of us think it traps people in the same wealth bubbles generation after generation. Cher leaned in now, her voice low but intense. And some of us think it's none of the government's business what a family does with their own money. My mom used to say, if you earned it, you get to choose who holds it next. That's how I live. The audience broke into applause again. Whoopi raised her eyebrows, sensing the tension climb. Okay, I think we've got two strong perspectives here. Cher saying inheritance is about legacy and love. Joy is saying it's about fairness and opportunity. Joy crossed her arms, smiling. Yeah, but legacy doesn't put food on the table for the kid whose parents didn't have anything to pass down. Cher didn't blink. And taking what someone else earned doesn't feed that kid either. The room fell into a brief, uneasy silence. Even Whoopi's calm gaze couldn't dissolve it. From the control booth, a producer whispered into an earpiece. Keep rolling. This is good TV. Cher sat back, her hands clasped, eyes steady on Joy. You know, Joy, I've been called a lot of things in my life. Lucky, privileged, even spoiled. But what I am is someone who worked hard, made mistakes, and learned that family is all you've got at the end. I'll protect that, tax or no tax. Joy gave a short laugh, shaking her head. And I'll protect the idea that everyone deserves a fair shot, not just the ones lucky enough to be born into your kind of family. The crowd gasped softly. Cher's lips faded. The air between them shifted, no longer playful, no longer polite, just heavy. Whoopi looked around, realizing they were only getting started. Okay, she said finally, I think we might need a commercial break before we need a referee. The cameras cut to black, but the tension didn't fade. Both women stayed seated, eyes locked, neither backing down. The audience could feel it. This wasn't over.
When the show came back from the break, the tension was practically humming through the air. The audience could sense it the moment the music faded and Whoopi's calm voice tried to steer things back on track. Welcome back to The View, everyone, she said with a polite smile. We're talking about whether family inheritance should be taxed more heavily, a conversation that's clearly struck a nerve. Joy let out a dry laugh. You could say that again. Cher didn't look at her. She was staring ahead, one hand resting on her chin, the other drumming lightly against the table. Her silver rings caught the light, glinting like warning signals. Whoopi continued. Let's pick it up where we left off. Sonny, you wanted to add something before the break? Sonny nodded. I think this debate really comes down to whether we believe wealth should circulate for the good of everyone or whether it should stay concentrated in families. I understand what Cher's saying about legacy, but at the same time, the wealth gap in this country is worse than ever. We've got people working 2 jobs who'll never own a home. Cher turned to her. I don't disagree with that, Sonny. I just don't think taxing families when someone dies is the way to fix it. Why punish someone's success after they're gone? That's not circulation, that's confiscation. Joy jumped in. But Cher, it's not punishment, it's policy. Nobody's taking your house. We're talking about fairness, about balancing a system where some families pass down millions while others pass down medical debt. The audience murmured, some nodding, others frowning. Cher looked at Joy directly for the first time since the break. And you think taxing families fixes that? You think taking what someone built and handing it to bureaucrats makes the world fairer? Joy leaned forward. I think it's better than hoarding it in the same bloodline forever. I grew up in Brooklyn, Cher. You don't need to lecture me about hard work. My parents worked their tails off, and we didn't have trust funds waiting at the finish line. We paid taxes. Everyone should. Cher's eyes narrowed slightly. You're talking like success is a crime, like it's shameful to want to leave something behind. Not shameful, Joy replied quickly, her tone sharpening, but unchecked. There's a difference.
The crowd's energy grew restless. People whispered, phones were lifted, and the camera operators zoomed in, sensing that something electric was unfolding. Anna tried to lighten the mood. Okay, so can we agree that no one wants the IRS knocking on Grandma's door, but maybe we also don't want a country where only 10 families own everything? Cher gave a half smile. Sure, but that's a political problem, not a personal one. Anna tilted her head, a smirk forming. Convenient, isn't it, when it's someone else's responsibility? Cher turned toward her, this time with a hint of steel in her voice. You're implying I don't care about other people. That's not true. I've donated millions, Joy. I support charities every year, but I believe charity should come from the heart, not from a tax form. That line drew applause, loud enough to rattle the table. Whoopi waited for the noise to die down before responding. That's lovely, she said, smiling sweetly, but not everyone gets to be chair. Some of us have to rely on systems because the generosity of the wealthy doesn't always trickle down. Cher crossed her arms, voice calm but firm. And those systems need reform, I agree. But don't tell me the way to fix inequality is by taking away the very thing families work for, stability. Every parent wants to leave their kids better off. That's human. Human, Joy repeated, her tone laced with irony. But is it humane when that cycle keeps everyone else down? Whoopi jumped in, sensing where this was going. Ladies, but Cher spoke right over her. You think people like me are keeping others down? You have no idea what it's like to come from nothing and build something. My mother waited tables, Joy. I wasn't handed fame or fortune. I fought for it. Every dollar I earned came with sacrifice. Joy didn't miss a beat. And that's admirable, truly. But the world's changed. You can't compare your struggle in the 60s to kids today drowning in student debt and rent. Cher laughed, short and sharp. Oh, so my story doesn't count now? That's convenient. The audience gasped. Sonny tried to redirect. I think what Joy means is that, but Joy was already leaning in, her voice raised slightly. I mean that we can't build a fair country if wealth keeps staying in the same hands forever. If you want a healthy middle class, you've got to tax the top. Cher pointed a finger lightly toward her, her tone steady but cutting. You say that like it's noble, but I see it as lazy policy. Punish the ones who made it instead of helping the ones who haven't. The audience went quiet again. You could feel the divide in the room, the invisible line drawn between applause and disapproval. Anna whispered, "Wow," under her breath, audible enough to make Whoopi sigh. Whoopi tried again to mediate. All right, deep breaths, everyone. We're not writing the tax code today." Joy, still focused on Cher, said, "No, but maybe we should, because I'm tired of pretending that the rich passing down fortunes generation after generation is somehow sacred." Cher's voice dropped low. "And I'm tired of people who never built anything trying to decide how families should live after they're gone." The words landed hard. The audience collectively gasped again. Joy blinked, then gave a small, incredulous laugh. "You know what, Cher? I think you just proved my point. The minute someone questions the system, the response is always, you just don't understand success." Cher shook her head. "I understand fairness. I just don't think it's fair to take from people who already gave everything." "Everything?" Joy asked, raising her eyebrow. "You still have enough to fill 5 lifetimes." Cher smirked. "And I earned every one of them." The two stared each other down as the camera panned out slowly, catching the tension in every corner of the room. The audience's applause sign lit up, but only half obeyed. Whoopi finally stepped in. Okay, we're going to take another break before these two end up rewriting the Constitution." The audience laughed nervously, but the tension didn't fade. As the music swelled and the cameras cut to commercial, Cher leaned slightly toward Joy, her voice just low enough for the microphones to catch. "You can joke all you want, Joy, but legacy isn't greed, it's love." Joy's eyes flicked up. "Then maybe love needs a tax bracket." The music faded out, but the words hung there, lingering in the thick, electric air.
When the show returned from the commercial break, the energy in the studio had shifted. What began as a policy debate now carried something deeper, an emotional undercurrent neither woman could fully hide. The audience could sense it. The usual daytime chatter had turned into quiet anticipation. Whoopi leaned toward her microphone, her tone gentler now. "All right, welcome back to The View. We're having a passionate discussion today about whether family inheritance should be taxed more heavily. It's clear there's more to this than just numbers."
Cher, Joy, you both have strong feelings on this. Maybe we can talk about why. Cher took a slow breath. For the first time that morning, her posture softened. Why? Because it's personal, she said quietly. My mother raised me on her own. We didn't have anything. There were times we couldn't even afford heat. But she used to tell me, Cher, when you make it, make sure it matters. That's why I worked like I did. And when she passed, everything she had, what little there was, I kept it. Not because it was valuable, but because it meant she'd left me something. The room went still. Even Joy's expression softened a bit. Cher continued, voice steady but emotional. That's why I can't stomach the idea of someone else, some agency or government department deciding what gets passed on and what doesn't. For me, inheritance isn't about greed, it's about connection. My mother may not have left money, but she left me meaning. And if I want to pass something to my kids, whether that's a house or a legacy, I shouldn't be made to feel guilty for it. The audience applauded softly. Some even stood. Joy waited a moment before responding. Her tone was calmer now, but still deliberate. Cher, I respect that. I really do. And I get the emotion behind it. But my experience was different. My parents didn't have much to leave. What they gave me wasn't money. It was grit. I worked, just like you did. And I want a world where every kid, not just the ones born into wealth, gets that same chance. Cher nodded slowly, but her eyes glistened. Then why make the system harder on families who've already paid their dues? These taxes, they're not about fairness, they're about control. I've watched people lose what their parents built because the government wanted one last bite after death. That's not justice, Joy. That's cruelty. Joy's voice softened. I don't think it's cruel to ask those with more to help those with less. That's what a society is supposed to do. But who decides who has more? Cher asked, leaning forward now, her tone rising again. Because let me tell you, when I was coming up, more meant having enough to eat. Now people look at me and think I'm the problem just because I made it. That's the part that hurts, the assumption that success equals selfishness. A few people in the crowd murmured in agreement. Sonny spoke gently. Cher, I think you're right that it's easy to vilify the wealthy, but the issue is structural. We've built a system that rewards inheritance over innovation. That's why people feel stuck. Cher sighed, glancing toward her. Then fix the system. Don't punish the people trying to give their families a better life. Joy, who had been quiet for a moment, spoke again, but this time her voice had a crack in it. You know, my dad used to say the same thing. I just want to leave something behind. But he couldn't. We buried him with hospital bills and an empty bank account. So when I hear someone talk about legacy, I think about all the families who never get the chance to build one. That's why this matters to me. The audience fell completely silent. Cher turned toward her. For the first time all day, she didn't argue. I'm sorry, Joy. That's awful. And you're right, some people never get that chance. But that's exactly why I fight so hard to keep the right to pass something down, because legacy shouldn't just belong to the rich. It should belong to everyone who's worked for it. Joy nodded, her tone measured. Then maybe we agree more than we think. I don't want to take that away. I just want to make sure it's fair for the next generation, too. Cher's voice trembled slightly. Fairness means giving families a chance to hold on to what they've earned, not stripping them of it. The moment hung in the air. Both women sat back, visibly emotional, but unwilling to back down completely. Anna leaned in softly. You know what I'm hearing? You both care about the same thing, family. You just see different ways to protect it. Cher gave a small, sad smile. Maybe so. But the peace was short-lived. Joy added under her breath, still, some of that protection starts with giving something back. Cher caught it, and that flash of heat returned to her eyes. And some of it starts with the government staying out of people's homes. The crowd buzzed again, the earlier quiet replaced by a rising tension. Whoopi, sensing where this was heading, raised her hand. Okay, hold that thought, Cher. We're going to come right back to this, but I can already feel this conversation is far from over. The audience cheered as the camera zoomed out, but between Joy and Cher, the warmth had cooled again. They sat side by side, looking ahead, both knowing the next round wouldn't be about policy anymore. It would be personal.
The atmosphere when The View returned from the next commercial break was tense, almost brittle. The studio lights seemed harsher, the air thicker. Joy and Cher both sat forward now, no longer hiding behind polite smiles. You could feel it, the calm before a storm that everyone knew was coming. Whoopi tried her best to ease back into the discussion. All right, welcome back. We've been talking about whether family inheritance should be taxed more heavily, and I think it's safe to say this conversation's been passionate. The audience laughed lightly, but it did little to dissolve the energy that lingered on set. Joy chuckled dryly. Well, Whoopi, when you mix money and family, you're bound to get fireworks. Cher crossed her arms, her voice calm but edged. Or maybe when people stop listening and start preaching. A low "ooh" rippled through the audience. Joy's eyebrows lifted. Oh, I'm listening, Cher. I just happen to disagree with you. That's how debates work. Cher leaned forward, resting her hands on the table. Disagreeing is fine, Joy, but you've been twisting my words since we started. I'm talking about protecting families, and you keep turning it into greed versus generosity. Joy smirked slightly. Well, when you defend billionaires more than working people, that's how it starts to sound. That line hit like a slap. The audience gasped, some clapping nervously. Cher's face stiffened, her tone sharpening. Don't you put words in my mouth. I never defended billionaires. I defended families, mine, yours, everyone's. And it's insulting that you keep reducing this to some rich versus poor argument. Because that's what it is, Joy shot back, voice raised. If you're sitting on millions and you think paying your fair share is an insult, then yeah, it's about privilege. The room erupted. Applause, boos, gasps. It was chaos. Whoopi held up her hands. All right, let's cool it down. But neither woman seemed to hear her. Cher's voice cut through the noise, firm and cold. You don't know me, Joy. You don't know what I've given away, what I've built, or what I've lost. You sit here every day talking about fairness, but you attack anyone who's done well for themselves like it's a crime. Joy gave a short laugh. Well, I'm not attacking success, Cher. I'm questioning systems that make life impossible for everyone else. There's a difference. Cher's patience cracked. Oh, come on. You can't build people up by tearing others down. You think taxing inheritance will suddenly make everyone equal? It won't. It'll just hurt the same families you claim to care about. Joy didn't back down. And doing nothing keeps the system exactly the same, tilted toward people like you. People like me? Cher's tone darkened. Joy nodded undeterred. People who've forgotten what struggle looks like. That one landed hard. The audience let out an audible gasp. Cher froze. For a long moment, she didn't speak. Her jaw tightened, and she looked down at the table, as if steadying herself. When she looked back up, her eyes glistened, not with tears, but with fury barely contained. Don't you dare, she said softly. Don't you dare say I've forgotten struggle. You have no idea what I've lived through, what I had to survive to even sit at this table. Joy opened her mouth to respond, but Cher wasn't done. She leaned in, voice trembling but powerful. I came from nothing, Joy. I know hunger. I know humiliation. I know what it's like to count coins just to get home. So don't tell me I've forgotten. I remember every damn minute. The room was silent except for a few faint claps from the audience, unsure if it was safe to react. Cher sat back, breathing hard. What I've learned from that struggle is that real fairness doesn't come from punishment. It comes from opportunity. And if I can help my kids or grandkids have a better life without the government slicing it apart, I will. Because that's love, Joy. That's what family means. Joy exhaled slowly, her own voice softening for a moment. I don't doubt that, Cher, but love for your family shouldn't come at the expense of everyone else's. There's gotta be a balance. Cher shook her head. And that balance shouldn't mean losing what generations worked for. Whoopi, sensing they were spiraling again, interjected. Ladies, I think we can agree that everyone wants fairness. The question is how we define it.
But Joy ignored her. No, Whoopi, this matters, because every time someone like Cher says, I earned it, they ignore the fact that none of us succeed alone. We're part of a society. That society helped you rise, and it's fair to give back. Cher looked straight at her. And I have given back, over and over again. But giving back should be a choice, not an obligation enforced by people who think they know better. Joy raised her voice. It's not about knowing better, it's about doing better. That's when it snapped. Cher slammed her hand on the table, the sound echoing through the studio. The audience gasped, half cheering, half in shock. Joy's mouth fell open. Excuse me? Cher stood up, her chair scraping loudly across the floor. You want to sit here and judge people who have worked hard all their lives because it makes for good TV? Be my guest, but don't twist my beliefs to make yourself look righteous. Whoopi stood up too, trying to calm her. Cher, hey, sit down, we're not... But Cher shook her head. No, I'm done. She turned to the audience, her voice rising, almost breaking. You can debate taxes all you want, but family, real family, isn't a transaction. It's the only thing that stays with you when everything else falls apart. And if the system wants to take even that away, then maybe the system's the problem, not the people. The crowd erupted into applause, loud, emotional, divided. Some were on their feet, cheering. Others sat in stunned silence. Joy stared at her, half angry, half regretful. Cher, don't walk off. We can finish this. But Cher was already stepping away from the table. You've already finished it, Joy. You just don't know it yet. She walked off stage as the cameras tried to follow her. Whoopi, looking into the lens, sighed. We'll be right back. The camera cut to black, but the moment hung in the air like smoke. Everyone knew what they'd just witnessed wasn't just television, it was a cultural flashpoint.
The studio had fallen silent after Cher's outburst. You could almost hear the hum of the cameras as they rolled through the tension. Joy sat stiffly in her chair, staring at her note cards but not reading them. Across from her, Cher leaned back, visibly shaken, her hands still trembling slightly as she adjusted her jacket. The audience didn't know what to do. Some clapped awkwardly, others whispered among themselves. Whoopi was the first to speak. Her voice was calm, a gentle attempt to bridge the tension. "All right, everyone, let's just take a breath here," she said softly. That was a passionate exchange, to say the least. Joy nodded, though she didn't look up. "We talk about fairness all the time on this show, but when it comes to money, when it comes to inheritance, emotions always run deep. I respect that." Cher turned toward her, eyes steady now. "It's not just about money, Joy. It's about love, legacy, and what we leave behind for the people who loved us most. Taxing that away feels like punishing families for caring." For a moment, the two women just looked at each other. It wasn't anger anymore. It was recognition. Both knew they had exposed something raw and deeply human. Sunny leaned in, trying to recenter the discussion. "I think what we saw here," she said carefully, "is exactly what's happening across America. Some believe inheritance is a privilege that should be taxed fairly. Others, like Cher, see it as the last connection to family." The audience applauded softly, appreciative of her measured tone. But Cher wasn't done. "I've seen families torn apart by greed," she said, her voice lowering. "But I've also seen people survive because a parent left them something, anything to start again. My mother didn't have much, but what she left me meant more than any government check ever could." There was a murmur of agreement from the audience. Even Joy nodded slightly, as if conceding that point. "Maybe the truth is," Whoopi added thoughtfully, "that we've turned everything into a transaction. Maybe inheritance, whatever form it takes, isn't about wealth. Maybe it's about memory." Cher smiled faintly, her tone softening. "Exactly." Joy finally looked at her. "Fair enough," she said, managing a small smile. "But I'm still writing my congressman." That drew laughter from the audience, breaking the tension that had lingered since their clash. The women chuckled too, relieved, grounded again.
The red light above the camera blinked, signaling the end of the segment, but the air still buzzed with the energy of what had just happened. Later, clips of the exchange flooded social media. Hashtags like Cher versus Joy, The View Showdown, and Tax the Heirs trended for hours. Some called Joy brave for challenging a celebrity on wealth. Others praised Cher for standing up for working families. A few just couldn't believe how intense daytime TV had become. But underneath all the noise, one thing was clear. People were talking. About fairness, about family, about what we owe to the people who came before us and those who come after us. Backstage, Cher sat quietly for a moment before leaving the set. When a producer asked her if she was okay, she smiled and said, "Of course, that's what The View is for. Sometimes you've got to fight to make people feel something." And she wasn't wrong. If you like this powerful moment, make sure to subscribe for more celebrity clashes, emotional showdowns, and unforgettable TV moments. Drop a comment below. Should family inheritance be taxed more heavily or protected at all costs?